Today's webinar is being hosted by JOP, The Joy of Performing, where we uncover why companies struggle with goal setting. And in particular, today, we're going to focus on what companies can do better to align teams, to align people to their strategies in terms of their activities day to day, and to ensure that goals are as clear as they can be. Because in our work, we often find quite large gaps between goals and alignment and clarity around those goals. Let's kick off by introducing our expert panel. We have Lewis Phillips and Ravi Verma joining us today, and they'll be sharing their insights on driving strategy execution. Lewis is based in Korea. He's the director of APAC for strategy deployment. He's an expert in strategy execution and transformational change, and has worked with large organizations globally to scale strategy initiatives and drive measurable results. Ravi is VP of Growth at Joy of Performing. He's got 20 plus years in digital transformation and strategic execution experience, and has been involved in a number of groundbreaking initiatives in India mainly. For example, the smart card-based healthcare insurance for the government of India, and introducing India's first paperless e-KYC in the pension sector. Ravi, I'm assuming that's know your customer, the KYC.
KYC.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Excellent. So that's the team. I'm Grant Crow. I'm based in London. So we've got London, Delhi, and Korea. Seoul tonight. Very much United Nations here. If I can kick off, guys, question to either of you, really. From your perspectives and experience, what does effective goal setting look like in an organization? And how do you define and achieve clarity and alignment?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Grant. Hey, Lois. Now, how does effective goal setting look like in an organization? Before I think so, answer that, let's take a step back, okay? How currently most of the organizations they are doing, and how we expect, as a subject matter expert, how do we expect to for them to do it, right? So as of now, major organizations, they create a static yearly goal setting, okay? And though they execute the business at a quarterly level, but right now the goal setting is done totally keeping in mind not how the business is being executed, but how a performance must be evaluated. At least I can talk about in India. But now times are changing. A lot of aggressive organizations, startups, mid-size and large organizations, who have understood that they have to tie up and align that business execution with the performance. So they are now creating those goals on a quarterly basis, calibrating that goals, keeping those external factors in the mind. And now we see quite a few organizations who are practicing goal setting at a quarterly level rather than at a yearly. But largely, I will say, it looks like a static yearly goal setting, okay, and disconnected from the business execution. Right?
Okay. So I think what I hear you saying, Ravi, is more frequent goal setting, not static, more agile, and taking time and recognizing the need to align the organization goals
Right.
with the actual execution of those goals and the practical, how that practically gets done on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Lewis, anything to add to that one?
I mean, I'll add something, but Ravi makes, very good points. I think if you consider clarity and alignment and what they mean in terms of a goal-setting environment, right? Clarity is really about visibility on, goals and the activities that are supposed to drive those goals, right? And clarity can also be in alignment with, how clear are your goals in terms of language as well, right? So that's sort of broadly clarity, and it's not just goals when they're set, and as Ravi said, it's how they actually are executed with the organization as well. And if you look at alignment, it's alignment between those goals and then alignment between those goals and the strategy. You know, a good organization will absolutely have good alignment, but then it's also, to very much to Ravi's point, is how aligned is the top of the organization or the C-suite with the bottom of the organization? I mean, are we actually addressing the problems that our employees are seeing, our customers are seeing, our suppliers are seeing, right? Or is it really just where the top of the organization thinks the business should go, right? So it's, when I think of clarity and alignment, that's the kind of things that I'm thinking about. And the organizations that are very good at goal setting are very good at having clarity and alignment, you know, vertically and horizontally across the organization.
Great. I mean, if I
Grant,
think about, yes, Ravi.
sorry. I just would like to add one more thing. As Luis pointed out, the clarity also means how you have written those goals. And largely, I think so. When I'm interacting with the large companies, okay, mid-sized companies, I see the people writing the goals in their very own way, right? That is, but yes, since they understand the KPIs well, so they can write the KPIs quite well because that is now being cascaded right from top to down. But how they are contributing, how they are aligning, how their goals are aligning, how to write that itself is a big problem.
I mean, I think you're being very polite there, Ravi, in terms of describing how people do it in their own way.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at my experience, I'm often disappointed and puzzled at how bad, let's say, middle and even senior management tend to be in actually writing goals. It seems like a basic kind of competence that one should expect.
Right.
And as you say, KPIs seem to be more easy to write. But often people will write goals that, unless someone checks the quality of those and goes, hang on a minute, that's not clear. You know, you then have a badly written goal that people are trying to shape their work around.
Right. Yeah. And I think so that's a basic requirement at a very, very unit level, that if we can write it better, I think so we can give people more clarity, we can give managers more clarity, I can give my team member more clarity. I think so that is very much needed and yet unsolved.
Yeah. I think also one of the things I've experienced is how in larger organizations in particular, the strategy tends to be communicated like once. So the C-suite, you were talking, Lewis, about the C-suite and clarity there. There'll tend to be, there's an annual sort of strategy cycle. A deck gets produced. That deck then gets presented to the entire organization and maybe gets loaded up to kind of SharePoint or something like that. So it's really been communicated once. And that feels like that's completely insufficient. You know, because there's a lot of complexity in these things, right?
Yeah, and it's almost on the onus of the organization there. It's like, okay, guys, you know, these are our goals. They're potentially, you know, very ambiguous, right? Now go off and create your own goals with no coaching, no support, you know, no conduit between the C-suite and the organization at all. It's kind of like free reign, you know, free reign strategy kind of thing. Whereas it needs to be a much more collaborative process and making sure that it is all connected and aligned, and everyone does understand what you mean when you say things like world-class leadership and, you know, market leaders and, you know, collaboration across, you know, teams, stuff like that, right? Let's get rid of the ambiguity.
I mean, what does that tell us about leadership and what they think about strategy and what it takes to actually get it implemented? If in many cases, you know, it's communicated, they've done the hard work, you know, it's maybe several days away and off-site, you know, coming up with the actual strategy. And that's where maybe leaders think the work needs to be done. And then they're communicating it once and then just assuming that, you know, people are going to magically, so it feels like they're getting that wrong, right?
Yes, I think so. Seems so that, as you rightly said, that since it's a once in a year kind of an activity, right? So, but business is too volatile these days, and I think so. Now we do not talk about it, but I'll point out from the COVID times that how drastically now the time to create that strategy for consideration has dropped from 5 to 3 years also. Now businesses landscapes are changing fast. So should we not be agile enough to think about the strategy of how the business is going and leave the goals, right, for 1 second? But should we only consider talking about the strategy in once in a year? I think so. We have to come out from that mindset and first of all accept that yes, what does these times need first of all?
Mhm.
That will help.
Ravi, in your work in India, are you seeing some of the leadership teams that you're working with, challenging that idea and having strategy discussions more than once a year?
Yes, some of them are, and fast growing, I'm talking about fast growing startups. They are they are revising their strategy, they are revisiting their strategy, and they are reflecting it back. In my line of work with the Indian clients under OKRs, we do a lot of reflect and research. So there are clients who are doing these reflect and reset on a strategy level as also half a year. Right? They spend 2 quarters because again, as I say that the business is fast changing. Opportunities are fast coming on your way. So are the risk also. Right? We cannot waste our resources. We have to optimize those resources. Yes, we do have clients.
Okay. Um, Moving on, I mean, we've discussed perhaps some of the answers to this, but thinking about why companies struggle to bridge the gap between strategy formulation and the day-to-day execution. We've spoken about poor communication. We've spoken about having maybe a static rather than an agile approach to execution. But Lewis, do you have any other thoughts as to, why, in addition to the points we've identified, companies struggle to bridge the gap between making the strategy and getting it done?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons, right? I mean, I saw an article the other day that was done by the Harvard Business Review that said only 8% of leaders are considered good at developing and also executing strategy by the people that work for them, right? So that inherently implies that, only a few people are very good at it, and also it must be very difficult. So there must be a sort of a myriad of reasons as to why people struggle to bridge the gap between the planning and the execution. And as you said, we've talked about some things like, ambiguity in goals, frequency by which we actually address the strategy, and also, like you said, strategy living in the boardroom. I guess another one to consider that may not be thought of very often and goes relatively deep could be culture, right? So if you have a culture that isn't open and communication is quite poor, it drastically inhibits people being able to actually create goals in the way that they should be made, which is, they should be stretch goals, they should be open to everybody, right? And if you have, like I said, a culture that is not transparent, people are potentially afraid to create these stretch goals for fear of retribution if they fail, which will then impact the execution. And also, they're less likely to share their goals if you don't have that culture, which messes up with the alignment, which also impacts execution. So I think one of the things that we don't talk about very much when it comes to strategy, or there's this, adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast, is we have to deal with the culture, and we have to lead by example, and we have to set goals ourselves as leaders and show people how to do it, and that failure is okay as long as we fail fast. So in amongst the other things we talked about, I do think culture is something you need to consider when it comes to effective goal setting and bridging the gap between strategy development and execution.
Ravi, I see you nodding.
No, actually, I'll agree to what Luis said, but I was thinking in my mind an operational aspect of that question that I also see that technology, right? Not using the right technology for the same is also one of the cause. When we are planning strategy, most of the organizations do that on the Excel sheets. When we are planning goals, we are planning it on a different softwares, like maybe once in a year, goal sheet is filled on a HRMS, that too after a year. So I think so, and rest then all the execution level things are done either on some project management tool or something like that, right? But I think so if people are given a tool to manage their contribution and they opt for the right technology also, I think so these days that gap can be bridged. I was having a conversation yesterday uh, where it's a mid-sized organization, and I was in conversation with the marketing head, and she said that Ravi, we are using it on Excel. I only have 4 people, right, with me. Why do I need the system? I am good at Excel. Now the point is, if we can bring everyone under one umbrella, then I think so all those alignments, those horizontal alignments, vertical alignments, that can be set up, and that will actually bridge the gap between those strategy to goals to execution. So I feel that not using the right technology also is one of the reason I in that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're not using the right tech, management are not going to have the visibility, the
Yes,
centralized visibility of progress,
right.
I mean, and a range of other things. If we just go back to the culture bit, it almost feels, Lewis, like you were suggesting that there's almost like a generic, for lack of a better word, ideal culture for a company that is really serious about strategy execution or implementation.
Yeah, generic, maybe not generic, but they have to exhibit certain characteristics, right? The transparency, collaboration, and a willingness to stretch, right? If you don't foster that kind of willingness to fail, then you aren't going to get people taking the moonshots. You aren't going to get people really trying to stretch themselves to really better the business because they're terrified of failing, right? And then also, you get compensation packages aligned to goal performance, right? So people then inherently start sandbagging, which is kind of the exact opposite of what you want, right? Goal setting, okay, yeah, it aligns activity, but really it should be helping people strive towards excelling, right? And that can only really happen if there is a proper culture around it, I think, personally.
Do either of you have any examples of what companies are doing in your experience to create that culture and to reinforce it? I mean, you mentioned incentives, for example, and so on, but Ravi, have you come across any good examples of people, deliberately trying to shape and influence the culture accordingly?
Yeah. So there's a company, again a startup, fast growing startup, doing very good. And one of the very first thing that they started doing when they were introduced to the OKRs, okay, OKRs way of working is, okay, they all the senior leadership team members, they sat together, and first of all they started putting tick in the box. Are we going to share this with everyone throughout? Are we going to share this KPI, how we are going to do that, right? So first of all is the sharing part, because in Indian way of business or culture of business, we kind of do not share everything down the line. All those financial revenue numbers, we kind of restrict them to the senior leadership team members only. So the very first thought is that how transparent we want to become. What are the lacunas in that? Okay, pros and cons we have to calculate. And once they did that, because that was an exercise, first they did that with the senior leadership team members, then they included everyone. Okay, now this is what we are going to do. Are you open? And they saw the amazing result that everyone was so much aligned. They said yes. Even the sales team, which was doing X number, they started doing X plus 10 numbers. Because then they saw that, okay, my reporting manager is now listening to me. All my efforts are going to be accounted for. That's a very big thing. That's a very big motivation.
Hmm. Hmm. It's a good point. I'd kind of lost sight of the fact that at a national level, there are likely to be some key differences as well, influencing culture. So it sounds like in India, it kind of takes some brave leadership or some very progressive leadership to go against what is like a national way of
Indeed,
doing things, right?
indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
Let's talk cross-functional teams. Again, in my experience, if companies are serious about executing, often that requires much better cross-functional collaboration rather than teams operating only within their functional areas. Cross-functional teams often struggle with alignment. Different departments have got different priorities. What are the thoughts as to how to get everyone rowing in the same direction? Ravi?
Again, Grant, see, very first thing is because cross-functional collaboration and alignment for me has become a buzzword. Everyone talks about it, but how many people understand about it? That's the key question. So with our clients, we first of all educate them. What does that exactly mean? So now cross-functional, according to me, uh, you can see it in two ways. First of all, exactly how we are working. So if we are a team, so how we three, right, are working together. You are heading some different team, Louis is heading different team, I'm heading different team. But when it comes to achieving a single objective or KR, how we are working on a day-to-day basis at an execution level. That is one thing. What is required? But then at a strategic level, what are we solving by aligning together? So maybe Luis is sales, maybe in a manufacturing setup, your logistics and I'm manufacturing. So are we solving something? Maybe I'm solving that the clients are facing late deliveries. So now Luis can align us together, right? The purchase and the logistics together so that the purchase can take care of those logistics contracts and see that, okay, so all those logistics partners adhere to the timelines. So now we have to maintain and define those at a strategic level so that those alignment can happen even at a goal level also. And we can solve that and solving with respect to time. For the first quarter, we are solving this, then we will maintain it. So that kind of understanding is needed. But in my sense, most of us confuse it with the cross-functional execution, how we are working on a day-to-day basis. We are not tracking that. We are not talking about, yes, that is important, that we must work together. But at achieving something together, how strategically our goals are aligned to that.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Lewis?
Ravi's hit on a good point. It's I think one of the keys is having, you know, a problem or a goal that they're all trying to achieve together, but also giving teams the opportunity to come together and work together, right? Like actually blocking out time within a strategic planning cycle to be like, okay, guys, this is our annual goal. Let's get you guys together and work together and decide, okay, how are we going to best achieve that goal with the limited resource we have? And then if that does come to a head and we can't decide, then there does need to be somebody with the power within the organization to say, okay, guys, we can't reach an agreement, right? We believe that this is strategically more important than this. And that's it then. That's the decision made. We're now going to work together to achieve, this strategic objective, and we'll put the other one on the back burner. But it doesn't mean we can't come back to it, right? So it's going back to a little bit of collaboration, but also giving people the opportunity to actually get together within the planning period, but also giving somebody the power to make the decision, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that highlights one of the really practical problems or issues around execution, and that is people are busy. On a day-to-day basis, people, particularly these days, costs are cut and everyone's looking for efficiencies and so on. So it's very rare to find people with a lot of time on their hands. So, everyone is super busy. And then somehow they've got to connect or make time for the longer or the medium term stuff that hasn't forced its way into their diary unless someone, as you were saying, Lewis, actually puts that time aside. It feels like there's a constant battle there between coping with the day-to-day kind of whirlwind and actually finding time for the stuff that fundamentally is the most important, the goal, the sort of strategy stuff. So anything to add on that there?
Me or Ravi?
Either.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're exactly right. I think, and it has to come from the top at the end of the day. You've hit the nail on the head, right? Because without that guidance or leeway to feel confident to have that time, you are just going to fight fires. You're going to deal with the next problem, the next problem, the next problem. So somebody's got to tell you, it's okay, guys, take half a day, get together and work on the strategic stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's the strategic stuff that's going to make us the next millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? The problem you're dealing with right now might save us hundreds of thousands, but the strategic stuff is going to make us way more. And sometimes you can lose sight of that, right? When you're really in the weeds.
Yeah.
Totally.
I've been in environments where leadership have prioritized the immediate stuff. And the outcome of that is just not pretty. Ravi, were you going to say something?
I don't know. I'm just I'm saying, yeah, a lot of time it happens that the immediate stuff we focus on, and then that is being translated by the team members very differently because it is coming directly from the leaders. And definitely, as you are saying, that it does not end up beautifully, right, or correctly as per what we've thought earlier. So yeah, the clear differentiation needs to be there.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a view that employees tend to resist alignment when they don't see how their work connects to the bigger picture. So what are your thoughts, maybe starting with you, Ravi, on the best way to bridge the gap without overwhelming people with jargon and what have you?
Yeah. So now alignment is undoubtedly the bigger problem in any organization. However small or however big organization. Now resistance comes first of all, and let's say, okay, we have to align. Okay, there's a culture of alignment. Now, how do we, without overwhelming people? Very simple. They should start with their immediate reporting managers' goals, aligning themselves with their reporting manager. They should see individually and okay how they are going to contribute to their reporting managers' OKRs. Forget all the fancy words, forget all the jargons. Just see how, and there can be, right, people who are just on KRA KPI. There are people who can be on OKRs, and you are aligning someone with OKRs, you're aligning someone with KRA KPIs. So it is very simple. Keep it simple, and I'll always advise managers to keep it simple when they are talking to their reporting team. Do not utilize any jargon, and in our consulting also or in our master classes also, we keep it very simple. We say that, okay, now this is your reporting manager. Forget the company level for a time, okay? Just see, because whatever your immediate work is, that is impacting your team, your reporting manager. So just focus on that. But yes, you can also have a look at the team level, but at a company level, but do not confuse yourself.
Mm.
That's the one side of the coin. But lot of organizations, when they start with this agile way of goal setting, then people resist in alignment due to the transparency attached to it. They see that now their work, however good, however bad, it will be all on the table. That is an expectation of the management, but that is not how those people are used to of working. So it takes some certain time, it takes certain sessions and alignment by telling them that yes, this is not This will not be used as a stick, but this will be used for solving the problem. If a manager is tasked with 50 people or 100 people down him, how a manager will sense that who needs me first? Where should I look first? That is why the alignment is. So with the right education, with the right policy, I think so that overwhelming part can be solved.
It links back a bit to our culture discussion earlier.
Culture discussion earlier, yes, yeah.
We were
Right.
talking, you were saying about how transparency is key for a supporting culture for strategy execution. But if for some reason employees are uncomfortable with that transparency, and generally the reasons for that discomfort would be due to past activity, for example, if transparency didn't work very well, you've got a bit of a contradiction there. Yeah. Cool. I mean, a lot of
Sorry,
people,
Brad.
yes.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to expand quickly on what Ravi was saying, right? I think one of the things that you can consider if you're having resistance to change, right, is just to implement change management techniques, right? Show them the benefit. Like,
Right.
and I hope I'm not, overstepping what you said, Ravi, but maybe just in different words, maybe. But show them the benefit. Why are we doing this? Why is it important to
Yes.
you? And as you said, like, how is it going to benefit you, not just from an organization perspective, from you personally? Like, potentially you will save time. It could empower you to grow within the organization. If you take ownership of your goals or your activities and you feel confident that's what you want to achieve, it empowers you to deliver to the organization, but also to say to your boss, say, look, I'm sorry, my priority is this, and it's been agreed. I can't go running off and doing something else right now. And this is my focus. So it's this kind of show the benefit. Ravi said, go to where they are, not just in terms of location. That's great too. Go and talk to people where they are. But I mean, go to them in terms of language, get rid of the jargon, understand what their pain points are, explain how this is going to benefit them from a multiple angle perspective. And then another thing you can do is, leverage champions, peer champions, right? The people that work where they work that are really embracing the change and get them to espouse the benefits of it as well. So it's these kind of this kind of toolkit that you've got that you may use in project management can also be leveraged in this sort of goal setting and goal execution exercise as well. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add a little bit.
No, good. Thank you for saying that. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it does seem we're talking quite a bit about the individual now. And, if we look at the OKR framework, which can answer some of the challenges that we've been talking through, in most cases, OKRs are cascaded down to team level. They're not cascaded down to individual level because I think there's a view that they become a bit complex. So that leaves the question around, well, if you're approaching goal management with individual employees, in the more traditional style or outside, let's say, the OKR framework, how do you link the two then? Any thoughts there, Ravi?
Oh my God. Grant, I think so. We may contradict because you as a coach may contradict to my point on this one, but happy to discuss that. See, first of all, definitely yes, we start with the company level, then we come to a team level. But now the point is now again, what is the size of the organization we are looking at? Okay. And we are talking about using a strategy mechanism, aligning it with a goal setting tool to drive the execution. So maybe if you're using balance scorecard at the top to define the strategy and using OKRs for the execution and attaching a KRA KPIs along with it. If we have set that kind of a structure in however large organization may be, then I think so, yes, we can move to the individual level in the large organization, driving their KR KPIs to someone who is a manager at a team level, at a department head level, and then finally going up to the team level. But as far as mid-size and startups are concerned, we have clients where in startups, small, I'm talking about 50 people company or maximum 100 people company, we have set up the company And from directly company, we are connected the individual ones. For companies who are 100 odd people, we have created company level, we have created team level, and then connected the individuals, because not all the individuals will have the individual OKRs. Some of them who are driving it, their weightages of driving the strategic, because among those 100 or 50, there would be certain who will be driving those strategic initiatives. The weightage of that will be high for them. For certain others, it will be low. So for those people, yes, they can have their OKRs, and individual OKRs is also created for their learning and development goals also. How they are preparing themselves for their role, how they look towards that, so that they can now track it, and they can also now attach it to their performance also. When I say performance, the achievement, how they're achieving their OKRs. So yes, creating those individual goals also matters, and we are creating those individual goals or individual OKRs.
Okay. Lewis, anything to add on that?
I was going to say, I'm agreeing with Ravi. I'm going to go against the moderator here and fight the power. I think personal OKRs are fine. I think if you've got the capacity for it, then I don't have a problem with it. At least a minimum, at a minimum, individuals should own actions aligned to KRs, at the very least. But they could also have their own OKRs as well. But
Okay.
that may be a cultural shift. That maybe you have to be compelling in your
Yes.
argument there with certain organizations.
Okay. Yeah, good. I mean, I don't want to kind of push the job thing too much because, that's too salesy, but it'd be interesting, Ravi, maybe just to get a brief overview of things like constellation. Given that we're talking about alignment,
Uh-huh.
if you wouldn't mind spending a couple of minutes just, telling us about the constellation kind of feature and how that works with customers, what that gives.
Okay, sure. Okay. Okay. Now let's think about a setup. Okay, why even we need constellation? Then I'll introduce my viewers on what exactly constellation is. Okay, so in a typical organization, however large the organization is, reporting manager, whether they are at L1, whether they are L2, okay, they only talk to their team members. To a reporting manager talking to their immediate team reportees. They seldom go down. Okay, so for some reason, if there is a challenge, there is a risk, they go down. Okay, but that is not how they work. That was a requirement due to which they went down, because something came up and something was escalated to them. Usually, this is how, and this is where now the need to understand how people who are connected down the line, they are working, how their goals are shaping. I'm not talking here about the individual KRs or KPIs, but how everyone, right, are like, am I in green? As per the RAG analysis, red, amber, green. Is Ravi in red? Is Ravi's team members are in red? Are people under Ravi as team members, they are in red? So how do we make sense of it? That is where we came up with a constellation where we understood the power of aligning the objectives and having a bird eye view at the top from the goals perspective, from the objective perspectives, because these objectives are the one which are actually driving and aligning or rolling up to the company level OKRs. So if Ravi is there, and under Ravi, there are immediate team members who report to Ravi are maybe 20, 30. But under those, if we see the bottom line, right, there may be 500 people, 1,000 people under Ravi's vertical. How will Ravi make sense? Who is working, who is in red? So when I meet my team member, I open up the constellation. I see how my goals are aligned with my team members, and how they, because they are also reporting managers of their team members, how their goals are then aligned, and where are the reds in all the picture. okay, we also have to celebrate. So, okay, well done, good guys. These are in the greens. Oh, today we are just 1 month left. These are in embers. Boys, team, if you do not work hard, maybe these embers will end up turning red if you do not achieve at this rate. Those kind of a conversations actually help drive that growth also, and that is the reason. And also, Grant, I'll bring up that subjectivity. Whenever there's a meeting, whenever there's a cadence happening between two, three, four, five people, there's so much subjectivity that we bring on the table. How to bring that objectivity? And one of the way to bring that objectivity is, okay, let's focus on those leading indicators. Let us focus on the risk. Let us focus on the opportunities. Whatever has been done has been done. Good. Okay, can't complain about it. But let's see, are there any risk? Identify first about those. So that is how the constellation is being used, and this is the reason we brought it up, and our clients are really happy. And I think so that there must be an alignment at a goal level. One should be able to see that, right? And yes, but in terms of OKRs, we can set up more micro level alignments in terms from KR to objective at that level. However, things works. In Constellation, both of the things can be set up easily.
I love the name as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so how can organizations measure whether their goal setting approach is actually working? What should they track? How should they do that? Lewis, maybe starting with you.
Sure. I think with this question is, I think the temptation could be to actually try and track the goal setting and the goal achievement itself. So things like percentage of goals achieved, or number of employees that have OKRs or goals right within an organization. However, if you really want to see whether your goal setting, I mean, that will show you whether you have set goals, but it will not tell you whether your goal setting is effective.
Yes.
Right? If you're actually doing anything with your goals, right? So what you need to consider is, if you've created a goal, you're expecting an outcome and you're expecting an impact. So if you want to know whether your goal setting is effective, what impact are you expecting to see, and have a measure or a KPI that indicates whether your goal setting is actually improving. So let's say we've created a goal for improvement of quality, right? And we could say, okay, yeah, I've done my goal, I've done all my activity, 100% complete, wonderful stuff. Our quality's still no good. However, if I'm tracking things like number of defects, right, or warranty claims, if I do my goal, if I complete my goal and that measure is improving, I can reasonably say that my goal setting has been effective. I've set a goals across the organization, and I've given a direct impact and an outcome. So I think for me, if you've got a goal, try to measure what it's designed to achieve, and that will give you a really strong indication of whether your goal setting, is actually working and effective.
Yep, makes sense. Ravi, anything to add?
Bingo, Luis, thank you. But I would like to add few things on that, right? Let us try to see goal setting is working or not, or is sustainable or not. Because we have to set up certain structure. Okay, then we have to get into that goal setting exercise. So I think so, whoever who is driving the goal setting, and somehow I believe the center of excellence or a program management must be created around it. There must be several KPIs. Now we need to understand whether or not adoption is happening. What is the rate of adoption? Maybe we can set up certain targets for the same from quarter by quarter, or maybe from cycle by cycle. We can see what is the cadence on check-in compliance. How is alignment happening? Okay. How are people completing? What is the result of leading indicators, lagging indicators? So there can be a lot of ways. So I think so we must also see the other side of it. in keeping the structure and the sustainability in the picture.
Okay.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one of the things that I think about sometimes that would be really useful for the C-suite and senior management is if they could get a clear sense of if they're in an OKR process or they're adopting a structured approach to whatever that might be, to strategy execution, if they could get a view, a real-time view on two things. One is the commitment levels of various teams. And I think there are indicators that one could use to determine commitment levels. So some of the things I think about are, is that team checking in
Yes.
frequently?
Right.
That would be a sign of commitment. Are the actions that are agreed in the check-ins consistently being delivered on or progress being made on them? That would be a sign of commitment. There are many that one could look at. So if leadership could understand from an execution perspective, the commitment levels of different teams throughout the organization, and secondly, their maturity. So for example, if you take the OKR concept of confidence in an objective or a key result, if a team, states that their confidence is high in achieving a particular, let's say, OKR, and actually management know that that's, they're being overconfident.
Right.
That would be a sign of a lack of maturity or readiness, if you like, for engaging in strategy execution in that sort of empowered way. I often feel that if management could understand those two things, it would help them to decide where to spend most of their time to improve the overall process. Don't know if either of you've got some thoughts there.
I think that's a very valid, and confidence itself within that OKR framework. Thank you, Grant. It is a very strong indicator of knowing about a person's behavior, at how this person who is accountable is taking confidence versus achievement, whether consistently throughout the different months in a quarter, was his or her confidence always high, but ended up in a poor achievement, and is that also continuing in quarter two? Then I think so clearly it tells you a lot about that person, and corrective steps can be taken. And definitely other point, Grant, as you said, that check-in is one of the very big leading indicator of that commitment, because we are doing those meetings. People end up doing endless meetings, but are they doing it, keeping their goals in front of them? That's a very big thing.
Yeah. Okay. How are we doing? We've got about 12 minutes left. John V, just advise us if you have any questions that come in from any of the attendees. I don't know whether those will go into chat. I'll keep monitoring that. But in the meantime, we'll continue with our own questions. I think in the time left, let's start with any thoughts as to how technology can help with the clarity and alignment problem.
Grant, let us ask you that question, because you have been into technology and you have been shaping technology quite a lot. And how do you think? What is your thought on it?
I mean, technology is part of the solution. I think anyone buying it thinking that it is the solution is probably kidding themselves, right? But if used in the right way, it provides, I think, the visibility, which is essential. Because if management and senior leadership don't have early visibility on challenges, areas where they might need to put in more resource, areas where they might spot that a team is not fully committed or what have you, then they will take remedial action only when the results have been achieved and they're not great. So it's a bit too late. So I think visibility is critical with technology. Tech can also help reinforce the right processes, So like the check-ins, like the confidence levels, which really require people to think in a very business-like way. If you're setting an objective or a KPI or what have you, and you think, and you've got to think about how confident you are as a team that that will be achieved in this quarter or whatever period you're looking at. That's quite an interesting way and quite an empowering way of approaching things. So I think that tech can reinforce the right process and to some extent can reinforce some of the cultural issues. But at the end of the day, to be honest, if you had to choose, in my view, between great leadership and a spreadsheet and shitty leadership or average leadership and something like job, world-class software, I think I know which one I'm going to choose.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, Grant, you've hit the nail on the head, right? Technology plays a key role, but it's not the silver bullet.
Yeah.
I mean, I think anyone that's had any experience trying to do real goal setting and execution in any kind of manual capacity, or even using a spreadsheet, if we want to call that tech, and I'm using that very loosely, will agree that it is a soul-crushing experience in terms of complete waste of time, in terms of trying to consolidate data, get updates on time, get a real-time version of the truth. It's just not feasible. So technology allows us to have all those things as close to real time as possible, right? There's always going to be a slight lag, but without technology, particularly in large teams, you're not going to have visibility of how you're performing, all the alignment, all those leading indicators, or all the ability to course correct if your strategy isn't getting you the results that you need. So, just to kind of emphasize your point, Grant, that yeah, it's really, really important, but it's not going to solve all your problems. However, I'd rather do it with tech than without, if we ignore the leadership aspect.
Right. And I think so, Grant, I expect and I advise leaders to include goal setting and execution as a transformation project in their organization. Somehow, people do not understand because they see that, yes, if we are not utilizing the tech, then what is the harm? Business is still running. But they miss the fact that if they can utilize tech to drive that culture, to actually enable them with that enable the business with that right culture, right? That can only be done through the right tech. Yes, and tech, as you rightly said, that tech is a part of the solution, not just a solution. So, but if they can utilize and see that if they can add goal setting and execution as a key transformation project, I think a lot can be changed. A lot.
Agreed. Perhaps as a last question, we've got, I think, just over 5 minutes left. What are the panel's thoughts on the role of AI in solving, challenges around alignment, clarity, etc., as we've been discussing today?
Liz, first.
Yeah, I think AI, it's so new to everybody right now. I work with organizations that can't even wrap their arms around data, right? And really good data is what underpins really functional AI. But I think in the early stages, I think goal setting can be enhanced by AI, as in it can point you in the right direction. If you put in the right parameters, the right information, industries, what you're trying to achieve, then something like ChatGPT can point you in the right direction, and it can expedite what you're trying to do. It can improve performance, but it requires the human in the loop, right? You're not going to get true strategic insight from the current AI in its current situation unless you have top quality infrastructure and data, right? You still need the human in the loop to give it nuance and to apply it correctly to what you're trying to achieve, and to really just check that it's valid at the end of the day. We all need to make sure that as much as we all leverage AI in our day-to-day, it's trust but verify, I think, is the expression that needs to be used.
Can't agree more on that. Definitely, Grant. I also think that AI can be a great support system, and we must create AI tools in a similar manner. And a very key example which I can share with you is on our agenda is maybe people can utilize if there is an organization annual operating plan, how we people can create their OKRs, or how AI can help them create OKRs from that annual operating plan, cascade it. AI can also help because AI is now sitting on a lot of data. Okay, if people are using the tech like GOP, uh, uh, it can recommend, it can become a recommendation engine also if there is a right role definition, if the right way of OKRs are set. So it can also be a very powerful recommendation engine where it is recommending a person how to improve. So yeah, but I still I'll go with Louis that still it's very early. A lot of people are doing a lot of efforts and creating some meaningful work around AI. So I see that yes, it can become a very good support system if
Yeah.
we as a job utilize. And we are, yes, we have a roadmap for the same. Uh, s- uh, Grant, sorry, I could not stop myself, right, while looking at this Q&A question. And I
Yeah.
think so we discussed everything today, but we did not discuss that HR, okay? How can HR influence or support leadership when they themselves are not aligned on company priorities? And that's a nice question.
Yeah, I saw that someone's listed that. It's an interesting one because I don't know if this person might be talking from experience. So the question is, how can HR influence or support leadership when they themselves are not aligned on company priorities? I'm not very
So,
sure
so,
how to answer that
so
because
no,
they can't.
I could take a stab. I could take a stab if you want.
Sure.
go ahead.
I mean, the answer is they should be. Yeah, I mean, all these companies around the world talk about how people is the most important pillar of their strategy, right?
Mm,
And so, therefore, that should be represented within their company priorities and their goals. And if the leadership team doesn't have that as part of their priorities, then HR really need to get a seat at the table and drive the importance of that. Because if you're not doing things like trying to improve employee engagement and reduce turnover rate, it's going to impact the organization in terms of performance, operational efficiency. So, to answer the question in kind of a glib sort of way, it should be part of the company priorities, and you need to make it part of the company priorities.
And I think actually having discussed what we've discussed today and touching on the culture, quality of leadership, empowerment of people, it feels like HR have a lot to contribute to the overall strategy execution process and initiative. And if they're not involved, it is going to be under, it's not going to achieve everything that it could. So HR needs to be more strategic and more supportive of the actual strategy execution process.
yes. Yeah.
Good.
Totally
Guys,
agree.
we are on time. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you,
Thank you,
Lewis.
Grant.
It must be quite late. What's the time in Seoul now, Lewis?
It's just touching 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock. Well, I thank you for your commitment. I'm normally well in bed before 11. So thanks, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it, participants, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks for having me, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Louis.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Grant.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
team. Bye-bye.
Bye.